Hey, I'm Joelle. I'm here to show you a Photoshop to Unity workflow with a focus on parallax. And so here I have my Photoshop document set up. I have all my layers organized into several folders. The first one is parallax F1 and then parallax 0, where I have my player and a couple buildings and the ground in the foreground. And then everything behind that I have in parallax B1, B2, B3, and so on. And then I have the sky in the background. One thing I kept in mind is that I need this left side to match the right side. And I did that by, like for the ground, for example, I just hit Command T and then duplicated the ground so it flipped horizontally. And then to double check all of that, I went to View, Pattern Review, and hit OK. And then I could see that everything looks pretty good. If I scroll over here and hit Command plus, I can see that my mountain and my ground should be okay when I'm doing the parallaxing.
So Joelle set up the file in Photoshop and she gave it to me, and I'm going to move it over to Unity, and I'm going to talk about how to control layer groups and how those are converted to sprites using the PSD importer. And then I'm going to put the sprites in the scene and set them up as parallax layers. And then I'll throw a character in there and set up the character and walk the character around so that we can see the parallax background happening. So I'm in Unity. I created a new scene in this sample Unity animation project that we use for all the animation examples for the two classes. And I've made a parallax background folder and a new scene called parallax background. So it's a default scene, there's nothing in it. I'm going to drag in the PSB file that Joel gave me. And it'll take a second because it's big, because it's a style frame as well as the file that contains all the assets. So by default, it comes in with the character rig enabled. So I'm going to disable that and apply. And then we'll take a peek at the layer folders. Okay, so we have, and here's the file. So recall that each one is called parallax 0, parallax B is in background, parallax F is in foreground. There are no foreground elements at the moment. So these are in order of their distance from the player, because in a parallax environment, the player needs to have a surface to stand on. So anything that the player interacts with will not display a parallax. So, for example, in this is from the Firewatch website. You can see that everything in this scene moves in relationship to the player. I guess it's like first person. We are the player. And so we're going to basically we're going to use the same method that the Hollow Knight folks used when they made their project. You can see how the things that are closer are physically closer to the camera. They're on a closer z-axis than the things that are supposed to appear farther away. And so it's basically mimics what we see and how parallax works for human eyes. So anyway, at the moment we don't have any foreground elements, so we're just going to set up the background. So we've got our object here, and we've got the Photoshop document, and in 2021, Unity 2021 and later, you can use the later versions of the PSD importer, and you have control over layer management. And we're not going to collapse any of these layers because she's just organized these Photoshop groups or layers just to keep all of the separate objects. And so we'll just use this. We're not going to collapse them with this button. We're just going to use this to guide how we set this up. And so the first thing I'm going to do is make a empty game object to hold everything. And so this will be the parallax, I'll call it environment. And I'm going to zero everything out with the reset so that it's all perfectly centered. And now I'm going to make 5 game objects that are children of this. And I held down Command and hit D, which is just duplicate. And so this will be parallax B1. And let me just check her file name. Yeah, B1 and so forth. So, and then I'll just duplicate this. And so here's 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and then we'll put the player on its own. Okay, so again, these these describe the distance from the player, and just like in real life, the further that something is from your viewpoint, the less that it moves as you move around. So the closer that things are, the more they move. The fence posts and the signposts fly by as you drive a car, but the moon stays exactly where it's at. So we're going to put the sky in parallax B5, and let's see, what else do we have here? In fact, I'm just going to move this so we can use it as a reference and expand all of these. Okay, and so the mountains go in number 4, and the rocks go in number 3, and the New York Times unexpectedly goes in number 3, and Cali Avant-Garde Architects side goes in number 2, and this one goes in number 2, and there's no easy way to do this. You just gotta look at the names. Okay, so that describes B5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, I've already messed up. That goes in 1, and front goes in 1, while this one, where'd it go? Aha, goes in 2. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Cool. Okay, so now we've got everything that should be parallax, and we'll move these things where they go, and then we'll set up the ground, which is where the player will actually move around and interact after we set these up. So let's expand our window, and we'll go into the scene view, and we'll set these up. Okay, so the sky will leave there, the mountains will leave there, and what is this? Uh-oh. Looks like there's some hidden content outside of the so that'll have to be cleaned up. Well, we can do that really easy. So this is this file right here. So we just go and I'll click on that one, and oh, there it is. It's hiding. Oh, it looks like it's from the ground layer and it got added. So I'll just move it up for a second. Use the marquee tool, highlight, delete, and I'll move it back down approximately where it was and hit save. When I come back to Unity, it should be automatic, and it should remove that stuff. If it doesn't, it's because I think I'm working on the version that is outside of Unity. Yeah, I'm working in this version, so I'm gonna delete that, and I'm gonna save this version over the version that's inside of the Unity project, which is the whole reason why we let's see, the whole reason why you use a PSD file is so that you can work on the same version that you're keeping inside of Unity to streamline your workflow. So it's animations, sets, and then we put it in the parallax background and sprites, and hopefully Unity will just automatically pick up on that and remove this. Let's see here. Is this the right one? Yes. So, come on, Unity, do your thing. Looks like it's re-importing it. Aha, great. Cool. So, now I can move these around and, oh, it thinks these are all on the same layer for some reason. That's awesome. So it looks like if I go into the sprite editor, I can try to figure out why these are now on one, even though this thinks, or it did think it was on its own, or these other ones did think they were on their own. So I'll go here to the PSB file, and I'll open the sprite editor, and I'll zoom in, and yeah. So the original, because that layer had that extra junk, the sprite size that it made, the coordinates that section off that part of the sprite are much larger than they should be, and it's encompassing these other files too, or these other layers, even though they've got their own sprite coordinates. And so basically, I think there are two options here. There was in an older version an option to automatic reslice. And so whenever you bring a file in, or when it gets updated, you can automatic reslice that. And so I'm going to just try that. And so it says this will reinitialize and recreate all sprites based on the file's layer data, which is, the whole reason why you're using PSB is because you can just keep them on separate layers and they're automatically resliced, and you can use it as an assets file as well as a kind of style frame file. And so yeah, so this will write over all of your sprite data for that, but it should be okay because we're not going to make huge changes. We're just basically changing the boundaries of one of the layers. So let's inspect our work now. Let's see. So I'm just flipping through all of these, and yeah, they all look good so far. Okay, so let's look at our actual. Let's see how it all turned out on the screen. So there's the sky, good, and there are the mountains, good, and there's that, and there's that, and this. Is that right? Yeah. And this, and this. So yeah, okay. So that was the problem. So if you make a major change to the pixel boundaries of a layer, then you need to check that button that says automatic reslice. Okay, so now that we've got these set up, let's remind ourselves kind of what this looks like, and we're going to recreate the scene by just moving everything around, and so that'll be the first thing we need to do. So I'm going to flip over to 2D mode here, and just because it's easier to kind of position things and just roughly put things where they go. And notice that the rendering order is not the same as here in Photoshop. In Photoshop, the layers, if something is higher than other layers, then it appears above those layers. And in Unity, there are a few different things that control that. And so one of those is the sorting layer. And it's a kind of misnamed because I think in Unity it really should be called the rendering layer, because it's only it's only a setting that's on the sprite renderer, and so for 2D stuff, and it controls whether something is on top of something else. And so right now these are on the same default layer and the order in layer is 0. And if I look at the other object, it's the same. And so if I wanted this one to come forward, I could just make it increase the order in layer, and then it will be rendered at a higher, it'll be rendered after. So basically it's like a painting. This was painted first, or a collage, and then this was added on top. And all I had to do was change the order in the layer. But to make this more explicit when you're working on a parallax environment, I recommend that you not only use these empty game objects to mirror your Photoshop groups, but you also make sorting layers. I'm going to call them rendering layers interchangeably because, like I said, I think that's what they should be called. And so if you go to any sprite renderer, you can click on the sorting layer drop down and add sorting layers. And just go ahead and add one for each parallax layer. And then you can control individually the way that they appear within the layers, but by default they're already grouped in the correct sorting layer. And I'm just going to match these to the different group names here, but I'm going to put them in reverse order because, again, the first one is rendered here, and then the next one is rendered on top, and so forth. So this one is going to be parallax 5B, and oops, how about B5? And 3 and 2 and 1. I'm going to call this one parallax 0. This will be where the character is rendered by default. And if I was going to do foreground layers, then I would have parallax F1 and then parallax F2, and I would count up as I move away from the character. And that way, that's a way to just think about, again, that, you know, the thing that the player controls is the kind of center of the world. And so if it's something that's behind it, it should increase in distance as it goes further back. And if something is in front of it, it should increase in distance as you go away from the character. But because the player has a view from the camera, then you still want to increase as you go away from the player. So now that we've got those set up, everything that's inside of Sky or inside of parallax B5 will go on this layer, and then everything that's inside of B4 will go on this layer, and everything that's inside of, and so forth and so forth. And so I'll organize those real quick. And great. And okay, so just because I put something in this case, this one and this one, here, let's set those both at 0. So to kind of demonstrate so again, this is parallax B1. It's the closest background layer to the player, and this is parallax B3. And hope I've got those in the right folders. Let me just check. Yeah. And so, but if two things were on the same layer, like this one and where's that one down here, then so they're on the same sorting layer, but you can still control their order and layer like I'm doing here. So cool. So the sorting layers are set up. So I'm gonna just move these around to, oh, that goes back there. And this one goes right here. And this one goes over here. And are we missing a couple? What are we missing? These buildings, what are those on? Oh, they're on, I haven't added them yet. Okay, so let's do that. So let's add a new empty one. And this will be parallax 0. And notice that I've set these up by saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's no reason to do that. I'm going to go ahead and reorder these to match the everything else, the Photoshop and the other. And notice how it didn't change the order of anything here, because these are just the hierarchy of the game. It's basically just describing the file. In addition to the sorting order, you also have the z-index of the parent, and this is why we put these inside of the parent. And so I'll go ahead and flip back to 2D, and notice they're all on the same axis except for one, which I managed to accidentally stick way out there. And I'm just going to change its z to be 0. So now they're all 0, right? And so the way that parallax happens in Unity, well, you can do it several ways, but the way that the easiest way is just to find your camera, make sure it's a perspective camera so that things get farther as they go away. And here, we'll change our view of the camera here. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can see it better. And then just go into these layers and set them at a different Z. And so the player is at Z0, and so I'll just make this one 1. And you can see what's happening on the left when I do it, 2. And you can see how it gets smaller and it moves further away, and you can see it moving out here, and 3. And I don't know that these z-axis fields are set to the right thing. I'm just using the same number that to match the layers, but you know, it takes some experimentation. It's based on the scale of your art, the scale of your devices, the world that you're trying to create. But now you can see that everything is on its own z-axis, and so they physically are further away from the camera. And if I move the camera, you can already see the parallax happening on these objects. Especially look at the bottom left of the camera, you can see the thing in the foreground is moving further away. And because the camera will follow the player, it'll mimic these same things. So this is a really simple kind of proof of concept that the parallax is working by just, you know, dragging the camera around. Okay, so let's set up the background, or the ground that the player will stay on, and we're looking for player and these others. Okay, so here's the ground, and what was it again? NRPA. I think it's just, yeah. And I'll go ahead and add the player, although I'm gonna swap that out here in a second with the actual animated character. Cool, so let's flip back over to 2D, and we want to put all of these on the sorting layer that is parallax 0, so that they are brought forward. And I'm going to order them based on kind of where they sit here. And I'll drag the ground to approximately where the ground is sitting in her artwork, and move these about there, sitting. And the player is actually going to jump on these, so we'll need to assign these colliders, the ground, because not only do they come forward, but you also have to add colliders so that the player can not walk through them, so that they have a physical presence in the physics world that Unity creates when the engine runs. And I'm just going to confirm that all the other parts are kind of approximately where they go. I wouldn't spend too much time getting into details, right? Because the second that you start playing the game, they all move around because the perspective camera is changing the what you're seeing. So so you have to kind of play test before you know you've got them in the right spots. So to add colliders to these, you could use a polygon collider and ... and find the right spots. But you need to go into the sprite editor and click on the and generate the custom physics shapes for these, because otherwise they're just going to be these big rectangles. And so I'm going to generate for that. So I click custom physics shape here, and then generate here. And so now I can drag this polygon to kind of roughly, and so if you've got the more points in your polygon, the more work that Unity has to do to figure out what's going on here. And so like this little thing is no good. We want to get rid of this. So I'm going to hold down Command or Shift, and I'm going to select all 4 of these. And then I'll do Command Delete and just delete that extra one. And I think I'll do the same with this one and just go ahead and just streamline this, because I think the player would want to walk like that. Oh, I see now what's going on. So if I want to create a new one, I can just click right there. And we don't really want the player to walk under it, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. And there we go. And so, so you need to do that for every object that needs a custom physics shape. And so the other one is the this building right here. And so I'll click on it, custom physics shape, and then I will click generate. And the player can never go inside of it. So all of these need to go away to save processing. But we do need one right here, because the player will be able to walk up and jump on that. So we'll make that flat, and we'll get rid of that one, and then we need to add one right there and bring this over here. And the player can't walk under there. It's going to be too big, so I'll having trouble seeing. I think there should be a ledge there. Okay. So now that those are done, and this is just a placeholder, again, because we're going to bring in the actual animated player. So I'll click apply. It's going to save that those shapes, and then I can close that. Cool. So in order for this to actually use the custom physics shape, we have to add a collider to both of these, and we'll use a polygon collider because it is a polygon. And so the second that I do that, it automatically shows the shape that I've assigned it in the sprite editor. Because it uses triangles, it's making a connection there, and that's fine. You can see the other one does the same thing. They're triangles. So cool. So that's great. And so now we need we'll also need a one for the ground. I guess I could have done that in there. Let's go ahead and assign that in the ground. I'm not sure if it's, let's see what it looks like. Custom physics shape. Oh, I don't think I did anything. There we go. Okay, so, and then generate. Yeah, and there is a, oh, there's like a sun or something in there. We don't want that to have physics shape, so I'm going to get rid of that. I guess there's a sun every every time the background loops. I guess there's a little sun. Okay, and I think I'm mostly satisfied with that, but I'm going to drop it down a little bit just so that so it's clear that the character is sitting on top of that ground. Drop that one down just a little bit, and yeah, that looks good. Okay, and apply, and then it will save in the file, and then I can close this. And cool, so now now that we've got a ground for the player to interact with, we need to go ahead and create that player. And we did that in another video with a different one, but we have a new player that is that she filled in. So I'm going to go and get that file here and drop it in. So this goes in here, and this is a PSB as well. And I'm going to turn off character rig, hit apply, and we can see here. So this is the outline from the original character, and then she did all the fills. And I'm going to go into layer management, and because she's using these layer folders as the entire frame for the character, I need to go and collapse each of these separately. They're not organizing individual sprites that are supposed to be used. They are the sprite. And so I clicked that little apply, or I clicked the kind of collapse layers merged button. And now I will click apply, and cool. So now it's treating the folder as its own sprite, and I can see them all in here. And so I already put the player in here, but I'm going to delete, because the kind of quick way is to just go and hold shift down, select all of these, and drop them right in as one. It'll add the game object again and prompts me to save an animation that is its walking animation. So I'm going to add an animations folder, and I'm going to, let's see, this one is called, I'll call it flower fill walk. And where is the game object? Oh, it didn't add a game object? That's weird. But that's okay. Oh, did it? Oh, I see what I did. I somehow added the sprite. I added the animation to this empty game object. I didn't. My intention was to add it as a child, a new game object as a child, but it basically just added all of this to the parent, which is unfortunate. So I'll just add a different sprite as the child, and I'll rename it flower fill walk. And then I'm just going to take the sprite render, move it over, copy component. Oh, it did move. It just didn't give me proper confirmation. And then I'll drag the animator over, and now that time it didn't work. Let's try that again. but I copy the component, and it's not giving me the option to paste. No worries, I will just do it by hand. The animator component, and then inside of animations, I have the controller. This is the clip, and then this is the controller, and I want the controller to have this name. So, okay, cool. So now I have the controller, and I can, and I can drag the controller here where it's supposed to go, and I will remove this and this from the parent object, which is really just supposed to be a placeholder. Okay, so cool. So now I've got my original object here, and let's see. We need to change it to sorting layer. Oh, excuse me. I'm trying to make a video here. Did you get scared? Did somebody come in the house and you get scared? Oh, woof. All right, say cheese. Say, I'm a dog on a video. Peanuts. Wow. Well, let's go get that person. There you go. Go get him. All right. So, YouTube. What a wonderful place. Okay, so now I've got my character, and I set the right sorting layer, and I want the character to always be visible in this sorting layer, because right now, if you see that I move the character down here, I did add it last, so it looks like it's okay, but on the right you can see it's randomly going behind some layers and others not. And so the way to just, make it do exactly what you want is to just be explicit in here. So I'm going to give it order in the layers 10. And now when I drag it around, it doesn't do that anymore. And it's actually a good idea to not put things on the same layer. So in this case, the ground and this piece of architecture are on the same order in layer, and they might fight. It's called Z fighting, I think, when you have two things on the same rendering layer, and the game engine is cycling through things, and it's trying to decide what you want first, but you haven't told it what should be rendered on top, and so it's basically just like randomly picking pixels and polygons and setting some of them ahead of to be rendered first and others to be rendered after. Okay, so we have a character, and I'm going to drag the same character controller we used in the previous animation, which is in this folder, and I'm going to drag that onto the flower fill walk. And it will require that I have a rigid body, so it added it for us. And we also need a circle collider, and we want this one to be basically its body, and we want the second one to be its legs. And so those are done. We can close those, and then the character controller we're using requires a ceiling check game object and a ground check. And let me make sure that I've got a ground layer. Yeah, okay. And so the ground, anything that's on the ground layer, incidentally, should be on the ground layer here, so that it so that the player, when it lands on it, will know that it's grounded and it's allowed to jump. And then we want to freeze the Z rotation as we did previously, and we want to drag the ceiling check and the ground check and the animator component right there. Cool, so I think it's wired up enough where I can test it, although I am going to move it over here so that it falls and we can see gravity working. So let's hit play, and and we zoom out, we can probably see it falling right there. And for some reason, oh, I know what I did wrong. Or what I didn't do, rather. So I added colliders to these other two, but I forgot to add a collider after I defined the physics shape for the ground. And so let's try that again. Cool. And so we can see now that the player is the physics is recognizing the colliders and recognizing the rigid body on the player. The animation of the player is playing because we haven't done anything to define what animation should be playing, and there's only one animation, which is the walk animation. But I can walk. Can't jump yet, so we'll have to fix that. But I can't walk into things, which is the desired behavior. But we can. Oh well, since we can't walk anywhere yet, we can't really see the parallax working. So let's hit stop and go ahead and make sure that everything is set up. I think we also have to tell, we have to tell the player controller what layer is ground. And then let's go ahead and create two animations and set the parameters for that. We need a float variable in the animator for speed, and we need a bool for is jumping. And then we need some more animations. So I've clicked on my player, and I'm going to create a new clip called flower fill. I'm typing somewhere. Flower fill idle. Oops, I put that in the wrong spot. Let's fix that. I want that in here. And then we want a new one called flower fill jump. Excellent. Okay, so let's we'll just pick a random. That's a good jump and a jump. Just a single frame that defines its jump, and then how about that for the title? Good enough. All right, so let's hit play now that. Oh, I didn't actually wire these up, so I gotta do that. So click on the player, click on the animator, and we want the default state to be the idle, and then we want to be able to transition to walk or jump or idle at any time based on our parameters. So when the player is the speed is greater than 0.01 and they are not jumping, we'll walk. And when the player is jumping, we will display jump. And when the player speed is less than 0.01, we will, and not jumping, we will display the idle. And for each of these, we also want a automatic duration, and I think for the walk, we also need to have exit time. We'll see. Cool. So, all right, let's hit play. And then, all right, cool. So the animations are changing. Looks like it's transitioning a little fast. Jump is still not working though, and so the way to check on that is to look and see if it is grounded. And for some reason, it's not detecting the ground, even though the ground is on the ground layer. I can tell you right now, I know exactly why it is, because I did not move the ground check down here to the bottom so that it can touch the ground and tell us when it's on the ground. So to do that, we'll click on these and I move the ceiling check to the top so it can detect when it's touching a ceiling, and the ground check down to the bottom, and save and hit play. And there we go. We know that we know when we're jumping, and we know when we're grounded. And yeah. Okay, so let's do a couple things. Let's go to the player and increase its jump force so it can actually jump over these things. And let's see here. We want to change these. We don't want to, oh, for some reason it still has a duration. So we don't want to transition to self for idle and jump, because they only have one frame, so there's no reason to do that. And I'm going to set the exit time for the walk to 1 so that it displays the whole animation. Okay, cool. Let's now we'll turn the stats off so we can see this whole thing. Oh, there we go. Cool. So walk, it looks good, and I'm gonna jump, and yeah. So notice that I'm on top and I'm walking around, and that's looking pretty good. But there was a weird moment where right when I landed, did not detect it. So let's discover why that might be. If I click on the flower, all right, so the colliders are touching. So here's the collider for the player, and the collider for that piece of architecture is, not sure which one. Oh, that would be right here. Yeah. So so the collider's right there, and so they're doing their job, which is they're representing their objects in that physical space. But for some reason, the ground check is not touching here, and it's because it's way over there. It needs to be maybe lower, or it needs to have a larger radius to account for the fact that we've got diagonal surfaces in here. So let's try to do the second. I'll just move this a little lower so that it registers earlier, and we'll test it and we'll see what happens. Yeah, good enough. Cool. Okay, so let's add a camera, or a virtual camera rather. Get to a virtual camera, we will do this, Cinemachine, virtual camera. And here's the VM cam, and I'll move it up here next to the main camera. And the first thing we need to do is tell it what to look at. We want to look or follow the flower. And we want to aim also at the flower. Cool. And cool, so that should be enough, I think, to make it that is wild. Look at that. Whoa, that's enough to give you motion sickness. I think I need to yeah, I think I need to forget how to do this. Let's see. Let's not have it aim and see what that does. And there we go. We can see that. I'll get stuck there, I guess. I have to add a physics material. We can see that the background is indeed showing a parallax effect. We can also see that because they're all built on the same size, they scale down, and we're using perspective camera. They scale down as they go further away, and because they're all built on the same size and the same canvas dimensions inside Photoshop, they're too small now in the background because they scale down. So we actually have to either scale down the things in the foreground or scale up the things in the background. And I'm going to do the latter just to keep things simple. So if we scale up on the, I'm going to check the link here. Oh, actually, I just want the X and Y to scale. So I'll scale the, pretty much scale that background as much as I want. Because it's just a gradient, so you really can't see any issues with it. And because I scaled up the parent game object, everything below can just stay its a regular scale, and if you've got more than one thing, it will scale together. And for the mountains, I'll scale them. And I'm sure there's some kind of like a piece of math here that you could use to scale these. The mountains and the sky were not recognizable objects, but everything else will be. So I'll need to scale those uniformly on their X and Y. And let's do, how about 1.3 and 1.3, and then this one, let's just do 1.1 and 1.1. Now this all will take some experimentation to get right, but that's part of the fun of game development. So the ground we don't want to scale because that'll stretch and look really gross, and besides it's supposed to be on the same layer, so it's technically not supposed to scale, but it should go on forever because it's the, it's the Earth and it's round. So I'm going to click on the ground, duplicate it, and just make it a child. So I basically made a copy of itself as a child, so that I can then just shift over like that. And I will zoom in to make sure that that link looks good. Looks like there's a little bit of a pixel hanging off the edge. You can see it right there. And yeah, so see, so I set that one where it goes, and then as I want, I can just add more ground layers below, and just keep scaling them and duplicating them like that. And I'm just trying to manipulate them on the x-axis so that I don't have to worry about like a little place where the character could get hung up. Cool. So let's go back to the camera, and I'm going to go and change its field of view, because the field of view I had manipulated the field of view on the original camera, and so I could see more of the character and the environment. So I'm just going to kind of zoom in a little bit here and try to mimic what the space will actually look like. As you change your field of view, it changes the kind of way things look in here, and so you want to be deliberate about what you choose. Cool. So I think we're able to play now and kind of see that there are still a few things to fix. For example, right now the virtual camera is set so that it allows us to see the below where the ground stops, and above. Oh, and we've got a little bit of a catch here where the physics is running in, the colliders are doing their default behavior. One way to make it so that the colliders don't stick together is to use a physics material that is set to be slippery with no friction and no bounce. And so I typically will add that to the rigid bodies and um, the colliders for all the platforms if I have a kind of platformer game. And we can see now that the parallax is working. This is not a production ready game, but we do have a proof of concept and have shown how to set up a Photoshop document that is ready to be imported into Unity, and then how to take the layers and set them all up on different layer groups and change their z-axes or axes so that they display parallax effect with a perspective camera, but then still make sure that they render on the correct layer. So there you go.